kind of, what's going on, what's the big fuss? The days of just walking it off are going away. So post-concussion symptoms should dissipate in 7 to 10 days, but you should be better in 3 to 4 weeks. Most kids, most athletes, most adults, they all go back sooner than they probably should be going back. First signs to watch for, a lot of times it's emotional issues, personality changes. There are easy, lucky go, school goes good, got lots of friends, and all of a sudden they're angry and irritated and their schoolwork starts to go down. You better start asking them what happened at the last football game or last basketball game or soccer, whatever sport they're in. Did you get your head hit? Do you remember get your bell rung? Start asking questions. There's 1.7 million head injuries per year. Children are playing football at younger ages. I got third and fourth graders are playing it up in Bismarck. It's, I think the football's bigger than the head, but whatever. Cumulative stress stops the healing process. This is the big issue. Somebody gets a concussion on Friday. Saturday, Sunday, what happens? They go back to practice on Monday. And basically reconcuss it again when they're at practice. Right? When you go to the ER is really good at ruling out skull fractures and intracranial bleeds. Right? But that's not what a concussion is. A concussion is the microscopic tearing of your neurons. Right? It takes the connections and it starts to rip them apart. It takes the cells themselves and damages them to the point where the internal mechanics can't keep the water levels equal, and the water starts to fill up the cells and starts popping the cells. That's what's actually happening in people's brains. So the brain is a gelatinous mass sitting on a brainstem. So basically your brain, it's like we always tease people, it's like a bowling ball sitting on top of a pencil. Right? So there's, as far as the skull and the weight that's up here compared to what it's sitting on, that's why the muscular support around your neck and your head is very important. Talked about this, where it hits and rotates the brain, bruises the cortex of the outside, injures the vestibular system, and it deals with the pituitary stalk, which is the issue with hormones. Percentage of all those areas checked? I would guarantee it's probably less than that now. High school sports are the most common, have increased level of competition, right? Kids are out there they love playing, love hitting each other, so you're going to see more of it. Stronger neck decreases chances of concussions. That's why women's soccer is the fastest growing area with concussions. And as funny as it would be, rugby is the slowest. Wow. Rugby guys know it ain't good to mash your faces together, so they work over time to stop doing that. This is a very important clue. I always emphasize to people, helmets will never protect you against a concussion. Right? Helmets will protect you against a skull fracture, but they will not protect you against a concussion. Why? Helmets do not stop your brain from moving around inside your head. Until they develop a helmet that drills holes in your skull and tethers down your brain, there is not going to be any advance ever in helmets that's going to stop you from getting concussions. Maybe potentially decrease the impact, but you still have your head moving. Your brain is still moving inside. There's the dangerous one. A lot of times they give the new helmets, they think they're safe, so now they start using their head more. So here's what we're talking about is a neuron. Don't worry about all the specifics and detail. I just want you to know this is, a neuron is a brain cell. And then there are a class of cells called glial cells. These are the ones that support and protect the neurons. Big fancy names. Astrocytes are the ones that deal with the blood-brain barrier. The glial cells I want you to pay attention to are what are called microglial cells. These are like little soldiers that walk around and look and say, okay, you're a good neuron, you're a good neuron, you're a bad neuron, we're going to get rid of you, you're another bad, we're going to get rid of you. Cleans out the landscape within your brain. You can't have dead or dying neurons within your brain. Otherwise what happens is your brain's immune system will identify those neurons as foreign invaders, build up antibodies, now you have antibodies against your own brain. That is not good, you will not last long. Right? So your system is very good at, once you have an injury, these glial cells go in and they landscape, get that stuff destroyed. The astrocytes and blood-bearing guys open up big time because they want to clean out your brain. So that's the idea, is to get stuff to flow out. The problem is stuff can get in. This is where we talk about if you have a leaky gut issue where you're getting stuff into your system that's not properly broken down, it can work its way up into your brain. Now you have antibodies against those substances. So anytime you eat them, you will chemically reconcuss your brain. You don't even need to hit it. Don't have to be moving. You can just eat something, and it will chemically reconcuss your brain. Because every time these concussions happen, and this tumor necrosis factor gets released, that activates all those cells, that increases the inflammatory reaction within there to help clean out the debris. You have to have that stuff shut down. Well, if it doesn't have 7 to 10 days to do its diligence, and you go and hit your head again, those glial cells ramify, meaning they double in number that will come out, they double in intensity, and they double in the action that they will do, and they'll take longer to shut off. If you hit your head 4 or 5 times in a short duration, those glial cells don't shut off. Right? They are chronically pushing an inflammatory reaction in your brain all the time, which leads to all sorts of things within your system. Problem is, where in your system is the weak spot? Right? That's where you're going to start manifesting symptoms. Or where in the brain was the injury? That's where you start manifesting the symptoms. Problem is, every time you potentially eat something or are exposed to something that can leak into your brain, once again, it's concussing your brain. It's chemically reconcussing your brain. So we need to repair those things and slow them down. And there are ways to do it, but most people don't realize that that's what needs to be done. So quick review: damaged neurons, blood-brain barrier opens up, the brain swells, microglial cells activate, the debris. Once the debris is gone, they're supposed to shut off, blood barrier closes off, and you're good. They're 6 times more likely to suffer concussions in school sports versus leisure sports. High school students are 3 times more likely to suffer a second concussion. I guarantee you NFL players that are having brain issues now didn't start last season. It started when they were in junior high and kept playing. There are a lot of NFL players that are secretly retiring because they're learning this stuff. I know one individual specifically at one of the nutrition companies I work with where he was on the field with Jerome Bettis, and Jerome Bettis was coming at him, and he was supposed to tackle him. And he just went in with the shoulder and basically didn't feel his arm afterwards. And that was the end of it. He said, "I'm not going to play." Because it was, for him, it's continually having these guys run me over and potentially have a head injury or get into something that were long-standing. I can keep my mental capacity and not have some of the things happen to these other players. So with concussions, there's a grading scale, 1 to 3, it doesn't matter. All concussions are serious. Just like grade 3s are where you lose consciousness. That's grade 1 is a light one where you kind of feel like you got your bell rung. Grade 2 is like, what's your name? And it's like you're kind of out of it. And level 3 is like you are out of it. You're on the ground, knocked out. The thing that needs to be done, though, is there needs to be a base test on reflexes, not on what the individuals say or do. I know there's a test out there where they take it as a written test, they answer a bunch of questions, and based off of that, if they get a head injury, they come back and take that same test. And then depending on how they score on that test, then that determines whether or not they had a concussion or not. Players aren't dumb. Kids aren't dumb. Adults aren't dumb. Right? If I want to pass this test, what do I do the first time around? I answer a bunch of questions wrong. So when I come around the second time and actually potentially have a concussion, it looks like I scored the same. And I can go back out and play. What we need is something that they have no conscious control over, and that's your reflexes. The most accurate reflex to check is your eyes. And that's why I got into using the Realize device, is I can actually look. The device takes 1,000 pictures per second of your eye movements. So I can actually see within a very short amount of time how well your eyes are moving and whether or not you have a concussion or not, or whether you have something else that's going on that we need to evaluate and treat to help get things better. So symptoms post-concussion, lots of them. And you can have all of them, some of them, a few of them, variations. Some that don't even make sense that you would think have no variance on whether you had a head injury or not. But if you hit your head, you start noticing these things. These are the big ones we ask kids, though, and adults. First one is, how are you sleeping? When you have a concussion, the anxiety centers of your brain kick in. Right? 'Cause you just experienced a huge trauma to the most important organ in your body. So your internal instincts start to rev up to keep you safe. So if you are a squirrel at night walking through the forest and you hear some flapping wings overhead, are you going to lay down and take a nap? No, because it might be an owl. Right? So your anxiety goes up to keep you awake so you don't go to sleep. Well, if your brain is injured and your anxiety centers go up, how well do you think you're going to sleep? You aren't going to sleep. But you know what the most important thing after you have concussion is to do? Is to sleep. And when we're dealing with teenagers in high school, an average teenager should be getting 8 to 10 hours of sleep. How many think they're getting? Like 6, because they're staying up late until like 1 or 2 in the morning playing video games and watching TV, and then they get up the next morning and go to school, and it's continue on, continue on. Are you having any headaches? It's more of, are you having headaches now that you didn't have before? That's the type of question you have to ask them. Are you seeing double, right? This is a visual thing. It doesn't have to be necessarily double. You ask them, is your vision fuzzy? When you look up at the chalkboard, are you seeing 2 things? Are you seeing where there's a haze around objects that weren't there before? That's what you want to ask. And then, how's schoolwork going? Right? Can you pay attention at work? How about with the adults? How about at work? How is your interactions with your coworkers? How are you doing with your work at the computer? Are your eyes beginning to get strained when they weren't? Well, these little questions are things that we just kind of poo-poo and think that they're not a big deal, but that's the beginning of the degeneration in the system. The vascular supply to your brain after concussion can decrease up to 30% in the first 48 hours. So one of the first things we do when we find out somebody has a concussion is we start giving them things that increase blood flow to the brain. Things like ginkgo biloba. Herbs can work really well, increase. We don't want to use caffeine, because why caffeine? It's a stimulant. Your neurons are already being stimulated from the injuries. You don't want to overstimulate them, or once again, you start popping neurons. You don't want to give them anti-inflammatory medications right away, because your body's natural response to any injury is inflammation. That's the response to help repair and clean things and get it out of there. If you keep giving them anti-inflammatories, you're inhibiting their healing process. And this is another big one that it's hard to push because it's all on the sidelines. If you ever have a head injury, do not drink Gatorade or any of the sports drinks that are loaded with sugar. When you have an injury to the neurons within your brain, the cellular mechanics within those neurons do not work as well as they are supposed to work, especially when it uses something called the glycolytic pathway, which basically uses sugar for fuel. There is a byproduct called lactic acid. You've all heard of lactic acid before, right? Well, it's supposed to be produced and then re-released back into the system. But if the mechanics of the intracellular components aren't working like they're supposed to be, the lactic acid starts to accumulate within inside your cells. Water starts to flow inside the cells. And because the cellular mechanics that would pump the water out don't work, your cells start to fill up with water. And all of a sudden, you pop down the neuron. Right? So first thing is we give them is just water. We may have them not eat at all for the first 24 to 48 hours, just let their body calm down, right? And then protein, no carbs. And you can start working some fats into it. Initially what we do is, as an anti-inflammatory, we would give them fish oils. Fish oils are naturally anti-inflammatory, but guess what also fish oils have? DHA, which is the building fatty acid for your brain. Right? It's what helps stabilize your brain matrix. So that has a component of not having to slow down the healing process, but actually help enable it. There's a more wordy example of why calcium leaks into these cells, which causes the water to accumulate, causes the cells to pop. I keep using the word pop, because I want to get this in your head. This is not a nice thing that's happening in your brain. Also want to give high levels of antioxidants. That helps keep the cells alive. Excitotoxins avoided at all costs. MSG is not just in Chinese food, or it's in lots of other things as a way to help make things taste better. Artificial sweeteners, colorings, preservatives, those things hook onto the neurons like calcium in. Once again, once calcium starts to build up within the cell, water follows it. And if the cell pumps that pump the water out can't do their job fast enough, you're destroying cells. Because your brain, we touched on this a little bit before, but because your brain controls all the metabolic functions, head injuries can cause some of these seemingly unrelated symptoms. Constipation, diarrhea, rashes, acid reflux. Well, that's potentially an issue where people start getting acid reflux because they got a concussion and their brainstem was injured. And so now what happens is they go and take Prilosec for the rest of their life because they think their issue is a Prilosec deficiency. Oh, it's because your brain was injured and never got repaired, never got properly treated. So increased homocysteine, homocysteine buildup, that's why we want the antioxidants. Homocysteine destroys our cells, antioxidants helps neutralize homocysteine. But all the things that we like to see as far as checking the overall health of the brain after head injuries is QEG scans. Because your brain is primarily electrical in nature, and it has brainwave patterns that are, when things are healthy, are stable. When things are not healthy, you can see the unhealthy brainwave patterns when you do QEG scans. So they've actually gotten to where they're starting to use this more and more as one of their things to find out what a person's baseline is. So if they do have a head injury, they can come back and get rescanned and see what potentially was injured or not injured, or what needs work or what doesn't need work, and you can work on it and treat it and train it right away, as opposed to waiting until, once again, you're the tire scenario and things get so way out of balance now that you're dealing with depression or anxiety 10, 15 years later and you don't know where it came from. So ideally you have 2 weeks to heal, 4 weeks are ready to play as far as sports protocols that we use. So the first week, no practice. Second week, practice but no contact. Third week, full practice, possibly play. Fourth week, you should be ready and good to go. So here's your general rules for a post-concussion. 10 hours of sleep. You may need to decrease fluorescent lights. That flickering can really irritate somebody that's had a head injury. We may actually give them glasses that have a red or a pink tint to them. On the spectrum of frequencies of light, red has the least intense frequency, purple and blue is the most. So if you want to decrease the intensity of light to somebody, you give them red lenses. Decrease smells. Don't be walking in the mall past Candlestick or whatever that place is. You'll get a headache real fast if you had a head injury. No sugar for the first 7 days. I know that's like, when's that going to happen? You can do it, but at least do your best, but keep in mind, if you do have the sugar, what's potentially going on within your brain. Put down your cell phones. They found time and time again the EMFs from cell phones can cause stress within your brain. That's a whole topic to itself. But just take my word for it. The more you can stay away from EMF patterns, the better off you'll be. And then decrease your movement for the first few days, but especially head movements. Why? Because your vestibular system is most likely been injured or damaged because of the concussion. So you got to give it a chance to heal. You start going to a rock concert 3 days later, I guarantee you doing this is going to make you sick. So concussions can have serious consequences. That's my entire point to giving these talks, is they have consequences if they're not evaluated and treated right away when they happen. If you let things go, they will get worse. Remember, you only get one brain. Of all the organs in our system, it's the only one that's totally encased in bone. Nothing else gets in there. I mean, it has its own immune system. That's how intense it is as far as trying to keep itself healthy and aware of doing its job. If it becomes injured, the rest of the system is not going to work very well. It's just a matter of time of what's going to break down first and what the symptoms are going to be. All right. I erased my little contents. Questions?
Okay.
What would you suggest, because I'm one of those people in the clinic in the ER that see these kids, what would you suggest as like a pre-screen, post-screen, rather than
It's in my little piece here. The QEG scans are good because it gives you an overall. So like if you're pre-sport, right, and before the season even starts, you go in and get a QEG scan to see where the brainwave patterns are at, and then get a realize evaluation. The realize evaluation basically gives you and tells you what the mechanics of your eyes are doing, and can evaluate and give you a baseline. Again, PubMed just came out with an article that said the best way to determine whether or not you have a concussion is fast eye movements and how well you do them, saccadic eye movements. The best way to determine those is a device that can actually take 1,000 pictures per second of what those things are doing. So if you have any predilection of, okay, no skull fracture, no intracranial bleeds, all the big nasty red flag stuff is not showing up, go and have them get scanned, because that's going to be your indicator of whether or not they still have underlying issues, because your eye movements are controlled by multiple areas of your brain. And so that can give you the best indication of where the injury actually is taking place, depending on where the eye movement breakdown is. And actually I have an evaluation result I can show you what the difference. I have results of a guy who got a concussion playing hockey. I don't have normal, I have his scan, but there's no mistaking that there's something wrong there. He